Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Captain America Civil War. I apologize for the lateness of this video. I tried to film it last week. Unfortunately, my editing software was crashing like mad crazy, and I eventually just had to reinstall everything. And by the time I had done all of this, I just had no room in my schedule to refilm it. So because I wasn't going to the theaters this week, I figured I'd just go ahead and um, record my feelings then. So once again, I apologize for being tardy. If you follow me on Facebook, and you should, I did a written version of this, so some of you might already know my feelings, but without further ado, I'm just going to jump right into the movie itself and what I felt about it. And I thought it was okay. I was pretty disappointed, but I will concede that I was really looking forward to this. The hype was really intense, and I may have convinced myself that I was going to see a great, great movie, possibly one of the best of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it just wasn't that. And I don't think it's really fair to have those kinds of expectations. Last year there was the James Bond flick Spectre, and I think that sort of suffered from a very similar kind of backlash. And I still thought that Civil War was okay. I'm glad I saw it, but I thought it was incredibly uneven. Throughout the first half of the movie, I was convinced that I was watching the worst of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Even worse than The Incredible Hulk and Thor 2. Now, granted, neither of those movies were really bad, and I didn't think Civil War during its first half was bad either. Worst case scenario, mediocre. But there were a lot of flaws that were really bugging me. And then yet in the second half, I really started to enjoy it. In fact, the second half of the movie was arguably amongst the most entertaining that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has put out. You know, up there with Guardians of the Galaxy, Iron Man, the Avengers. So this was a very confusing and strange experience for me. So, what did I not like about the first half? Well, for one, I thought it drew attention to how weak Captain America is as a character. Um, I like Chris Evans. I think he does a great job in this role, and he can be entertaining when he's playing off the right people, but his character arcs always seem so vague. The thing is that his convictions are too strong. He very rarely seems to second guess himself. Whenever he makes a mistake, he'll angst about it for like a scene or two, and then he'll just immediately get over it. And that just isn't very interesting to me. That's one of the reasons I think Iron Man or Tony Stark is a more compelling character, because he's a much more failure of a hero. He's constantly doubting himself. His mistakes usually drive the conflict of all of his films, and his desperate and yet misguided attempts to fix those mistakes only make it worse. So he's just a more compelling character, in my opinion. Whereas Captain America, like, yeah, in the very beginning of the movie, his actions lead to the deaths of some people, and he worries about that for a scene or two, and then immediately just kind of brushes it off and moves on. And you never really get the feeling that he's questioning his motives, that, you know, he never seems to wonder if he could be in the wrong. So that's a problem with Captain America, the character in general, at least in these movies. I don't know why the Winter Soldier worked so much more, because I don't remember a lot of what they did with his character, but I remember enjoying the storyline a lot more overall. You know, and it sucks too, because you could see like hints of an interesting inner conflict. You know, that the world has changed so much since his time, and you know, back in the when he was fighting in World War II, that was when the world really needed Captain America. But now everything has changed so much, and he's kind of a relic in the eyes of this world, and that could create some interesting existential themes. I know that kind of sounds very fancy for a Marvel flick, but they just never really do anything with that. They tease it at times, but it never seems to bother him for too long. The action scenes really weren't doing it for me. I thought they were just too tightly edited. The camera was very jittery. I didn't like the film's grittier visual style. None of it was particularly bad, but considering, I've always enjoyed, even the first two Captain America movies, I liked how they were more grounded in reality than the other Marvel flicks. Maybe it's because this time it seemed like they were using a lot more CGI and just straight hand-to-hand combat or crazy wire works, if that is. I don't know exactly how they chose to do it, but it just never really clicked with me. I didn't like how the perspectives were constantly shifting. It seems like every 2 minutes they were just changing out the locations over and over again, and I found that to be just very distracting and disorienting and annoying. Finally, the tone was all sorts of fucked up. Most Marvel films, they start off very lighthearted, very comedic, and gradually become more dramatic as the stakes increase, as it becomes more and more intense, and that's perfect. Here, though, it seemed like from the very beginning they were alternating between dramatic and comedic so quickly that it just kept throwing me off. You'll have a funny scene followed by like Black Panther's father dying, and it's very tragic, and then it'll immediately, almost immediately, go back to being comedic once more, and that's a very unfocused tone, and it makes it difficult to feel what the movie wants you to feel. And strangely, throughout the second half, it becomes gradually more comedic. You don't see that very often. I just don't think that works quite as well. I also had difficulty accepting the storyline. When they're bringing up all these problems, and I keep thinking to myself, but the Avengers saved the day in the first movie, so what could they have done differently? If they had the government support, what would have changed? And are they forgetting that the Avengers for a long time were under the control of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that ended up going very, very badly? So it's just like, I didn't get this. It just seemed very far-fetched. And seeing like Tony Stark kind of turn his back on certain friends, it didn't work for me either. Maybe it's just because the story moved so fast that he never really had time to contemplate anything. Like when his friends get locked up, maybe he would have gotten them out on his own eventually. He just would have convinced Ross to let them go, that just they learned their lesson, whatever. But there's no real time to show this, so it just makes him seem oddly callous, and I didn't really like that either. So, I mean, this was a difficult storyline to sell, and I think they should have had a gradual build up to it, not necessarily have the Civil War happen in a single film. Make it take place over the course of 3 films. Have one be kind of the, putting the seeds of doubt where the characters start questioning each other, and just gradually build into something more intense. The way it played out was it was difficult to swallow, even though I went along with it. But then during the second half, I ended up really enjoying myself. It started with like the airport battle, and that just everything I love about the Avengers took place. For one, even though it's not right when a film goes from dramatic to being comedic, well, the second half is a lot more consistently funny, and it just made me laugh my ass off time and time again. I thought this film was hilarious when you're seeing all these characters interact, and you're seeing so many different kinds of personalities and egos clash, and it just worked. Everybody had great chemistry. The film actually utilized its surprisingly large cast very well without ever really losing sight of the main conflict, the main story surrounding Captain America, Bucky Barnes, and Tony Stark. So that part was really well done. The action scenes also seem to get so much better, and I think a lot of it is just because when you're watching in the beginning of the movie, you're seeing people with somewhat similar styles fighting each other. Once again, they're a little bit more grounded in reality. You have Captain America, Crossbones, Black Widow. But once the other Avengers really come into play, you're seeing so many different kinds of gimmicks and powers, and they use a lot more CGI, but it works. For one, the CGI is great. It always seemed a bit phony in the first half. Like it just seemed like CGI suddenly hijacked this otherwise normal choreographed fight scene. Not many people are claiming that, so it might just be me who feels that way, but this is my vlog, so I'm explaining what I am feeling. But during the second half, I had no issues with the action. It was all flawless. I loved seeing all of these characters fight. And then during the third act, it loses all trace of comedy. It becomes pure drama, and it worked beautifully. I thought I really did feel the stakes. And one of the problems with when the actual big brawl with all the Avengers fighting each other, even though once again I loved it on its own, I will concede that you don't really feel a lot of drama. It seems odd that these characters don't seem that sad that they're being forced to fight each other. They're instead making these admittedly very funny one-liners, and it's a very light-hearted action romp. But I mean, I did laugh like when Black Widow's taking on Hawkeye, and she's like, "We're still friends, right?" And he's like, "It depends on how hard you hit me." I enjoy it, but I will concede that it made this Civil War angle seem like a wasted opportunity. But when Captain America and Bucky Barnes take on Iron Man during the third act, like, you really feel it. You feel that people are out for blood, and I thought it was excellently handled. As for like the new characters, once again, I had issues with how Tony Stark was portrayed, but I thought Robert Downey Jr. did great. I thought Chris Evans did great. The returning characters all do fine. This movie does give them quite a bit to do, and I thought Bucky Barnes was very interesting in how he was portrayed too. I always thought that he was kind of boring, but here, yeah, he won me over. As for like the newer characters, Ant-Man, even though he's not new, he is hilarious. He was easily the funniest part of this movie, and I thought he brought something fresh and different. I was kind of worried that he'd be just kind of like a Tony Stark light when you actually place them together, but nah, they were very different, and I thought he interacted with everybody perfectly. Black Panther, I found him to be very interesting, a very intense and badass character. I can't wait to see his movie. The only issue I have with him is he has his own character arc, and it's resolved by the end of the movie, and I thought it was handled very well, but it's like, what are they going to do with him next? He might have the same problem that Captain America does, where once his story is resolved, then he's practically a human prop who you see more interesting characters play off of. But we'll have to see. But I thought in this movie he was handled wonderfully. Spider-Man, I really like Spider-Man too, and he got about 20 minutes of screen time. I liked his personality, and I'm now actually interested in seeing that franchise get rebooted again. Fuck. But he did great. I liked the villain, and I think I'm the only one who does. Just because I liked how his arc kind of mirrors Captain America's and Tony Stark's and Black Panther's. I liked also that he has no superpowers. He has no major resources at his disposal. He's not portrayed as brilliant, but he has his strengths. He could see vulnerability, and he's patient, and he knows when to strike. And that made him in some ways one of the more dangerous villains, even though, yeah, he's not very memorable. So I really did like the second half of the movie. I thought the new additions were really compelling. I thought Black Panther, Spider-Man, they were handled very well, and I thought this villain has actually been underappreciated by the masses. Yeah, much like Batman vs. Superman, they're just kind of building up to the next movie while tying up a few loose ends, but this one earned it. It has a franchise behind it, and a franchise that it's looking forward to. With Batman vs. Superman, it played that card too early. The first half kind of sucked, but the second half was more than worth it. So overall, I thought it was an alright movie. Definitely check it out if you like these Marvel films. Don't have too high expectations like I did. Don't make that mistake. Just expect a solid middle ground Marvel movie. So that is all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.